From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Beres here with you on a Wednesday. A good show on tap for you. I'm going to invite you to join in the conversation if you'd like. As always, we put up the phone number and you'll be able to call in. We've got a lot of topics we're going to talk about with our guest this morning. Things happening not only locally here in Davidson County, but also, I would say, what's happening at the state capitol and how it affects things happening in places like Nashville. Our guest this morning happens to be, in my opinion, the most powerful person in Davidson County, or the most powerful person in any county. And you're saying, Nick, who would that be? Is it the mayor? Is it the police chief or the sheriff? No. In my opinion, the most powerful person in any county in this state is the district attorney. If for no other reason, that man or woman in a situation can take your freedoms away if a crime is brought against you. Very, very powerful individual, and they decide what to prosecute, who to prosecute, and they prosecute. We're going to talk this morning with Davidson County District Attorney General Glenn Funk. I don't know if you agree with me. Are you the most powerful man in the county? Is that true in any county in the state?
Clearly, district attorneys have an immense amount of power.
Yes.
Power over a person's liberty. Working to try to make sure that communities are safe. District attorneys also have a lot of checks on our power, which is appropriate, right? Judges check our power because they might dismiss a case or disagree with us about the law. Juries can decide whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty. Courts of appeals can check our power. The Supreme Court can check our power. So we have a system where we rely on one person to decide whether or not to bring charges and what resources to devote to an individual case to determine whether or not it goes all the way to court and on behalf of the people of the state ask for incarceration. But it's important that we put those checks on any individual's power, and so yes, district attorneys are very powerful. I don't necessarily say I'm the most powerful person because obviously, look, there's another check on the power is how my office is funded. In the district attorney's office in Davidson County, we get half our funding from the metro government, half our funding from the state government, and
state can control some of your purse strings.
They can. They decide whether to adequately fund my office, and I'm very fortunate that we're one of the few jurisdictions where the local government also puts in resources.
Well, you're an elected official, of course, and as district attorney, you talk about checks and balances here. You though, ultimately have the decision-making and power process to decide whether or not you're going to prosecute someone. Now, you don't do the investigative work. That would be, I guess, TBI. That would be the police department. They put together, make the case, make the arrests, and then they bring you the information on whatever the case may be. You and your staff look it over, and you decide, we're going to prosecute, we'll take this to the grand jury. That's your call, ultimately, right? Whether or not you decide to prosecute someone.
Correct.
Okay. And with checks and balances, I guess you're saying they're already in place. There are checks on your power, and that's what brings us to the point of what's happening of late this past week. We've all been reporting on what the state legislature has been doing, especially with regard to, some of the restrictions they're going to be putting on mask mandates and the like when it comes to COVID. But even beyond that, one of the things that they've passed, and I think as the district attorney in the largest city or county area in the state, you have a lot of power. A lot of people follow your lead and take note of what happens here in Nashville and Davidson County. And you've certainly taken some interesting stands, but what they've suggested under some of this legislation is the discretion and authority of the duly elected Davidson County District Attorney could be limited under the new laws. They didn't say you specifically, but I'm saying in this case. They're passing, some laws that could place some limits, and I think it's coming from, look, if General Funk doesn't want to enforce this law we put on the books, then we're going to bring in someone to do it for him. How do you feel about that?
Well, every district attorney everywhere in the world has discretion over which cases do they prioritize. In Davidson County, my focus is on violent crime. We work to make sure that we are spending most of our resources on murder, aggravated robbery, rape, domestic violence, things that make our communities safer by making sure that the resources of the justice system are focused on those very important cases. We deal with all types of cases. 60,000 cases, or 60,000 warrants are sworn out by the Metro Police Department every year. 6,000 of those are major felonies. Probably 3,500 to 4,000 of those are the violent crimes. And that's where we're really trying to take our limited resources, they're not infinite, and devote those resources toward making sure that we have a safer community. There are also situations where we need to take into account the individual circumstances, the individual facts of a case, the circumstances of the victim, the circumstances of the person who's charged with the crime, to try to craft a reasonable agreement that makes sure that we protect the community while at the same time making sure that we keep families safe and families together when we can. Some laws that we have that are kind of dumped in the criminal justice system's lap are really about health behaviors, right? Mental health issues, substance abuse issues, right? Sometimes it's a crime of poverty, like driving on a revoked license. What we've been trying to do since I've been district attorney is trying to meet people where they are, right? If it's a violent felony, well, you know what? Sometimes incarceration is the only option for that, right? But if it's somebody with a mental health issue, well, we've tried to pull those out of the criminal justice system. We've been working with the Sheriff's Department on a behavioral care center where we can divert cases out and deal with the mental health issues. We've been working with Judge Melissa Blackburn and her mental health court to try to make sure that we address those issues. We've been working with the mayor's office and with Judge Blackburn to try to find some supports for the folks that have cognitive issues so that we can properly address those issues in a way that keeps the community safe. So we've got a number of programs. Hopefully we'll have time to talk about some of those in greater depth.
Absolutely.
But with regards to this legislation,
let's just talk, because like what I think has gotten some of the lawmakers' attention, okay, is, you know, among other things, you know, you kind of refuse to enforce what would some be controversial state laws limiting abortion access, requiring businesses to post signs if they allow transgender people to use the bathroom of their choosing, the medical, or rather marijuana issue here in, Metro, less than half an ounce, unless it's associated with a violent crime, you're not going to prosecute that. And I think a lot of people probably agree with that idea, but others are saying, well, look, he's the DA. I mean, can he really just go about picking and choosing which law he wants to prosecute?
Well, let's take, because there have been 4 instances, and so let's take them one by one. The legislature passed last session a very restrictive abortion ban that was clearly unconstitutional. A part of that law said that doctors had to tell their patients that they could decide to not go through with some abortions halfway through the process, which no real scientist says is true, but the law says that doctors have to say that to their patients, right? A federal judge, of course, the lawsuit happens by the ACLU immediately in federal court. I'm named in my official capacity, as well as 3 other district attorneys who have clinics in their jurisdictions. And the federal judge here in the case asks the district attorneys, are you going to, or do you want to file anything that says whether or not you're going to criminally prosecute based on
a doctor who doesn't tell someone like this?
Right.
And you're saying...
So I very clearly stated my position, which is criminal law should not be used to try to incarcerate a doctor or a patient who's exercising their reproductive rights. It shouldn't do that, right? And sure enough, the federal judge said it was an unconstitutional law. That's my oath that I swore on the day that I was sworn in was to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, right? If it's something is that clearly unconstitutional, no, I'm not going to prosecute and try to incarcerate somebody based upon an unconstitutional statute. I
want to talk about this. Can we go through the other 3 as well?
Sure.
We're going to take a break. Sure. And when we come back, we'll hit on those, because I think, again, as I said, a lot of this, I think coming out of there, they say district attorneys, but you get the attention, and they don't name you per se, but you're the one that gets a lot of the attention because it's the biggest city in the state, and we'll talk more about that and others items as well on the show this morning. We're going to make our way through it with District Attorney General Glenn Funk here in Davidson County. Take a few phone calls as well right after this. Stay with us.